So we have been meeting together and moving through the great ideas and commented earlier in one of our sessions on this definition of ideation. The most important aspect of this as we approach illusion is this recognition that ideation is the process of forming ideas from conception to implementation, and it's expressed in graphical, symbolic, written, or verbal methods. The most important point is that it arises from past or present knowledge, influences, opinions, experiences, and personal convictions. And so our challenge as students of the Ageless Wisdom is to be thinking into the next greater level of awareness. And because we're basing everything on the past and the present, it is very challenging to not create illusions about what the future will be. As we move forward together, let's center ourselves and align as a group and begin where we ended our last session together. Heike, will you lead us in this mantram as we align as points of light?
We are points of light within a greater light, sense of loving energy within the stream of love divine. We are points of sacrificial fire, focused within the fiery will of God, and thus we stand. We are a way by which humanity may achieve. We are a source of strength, enabling them to stand. We are beams of light shining upon their way, and thus we stand. And standing thus revolve and tread this way the ways of all humanity, and know the ways of God, and thus we stand.
Let's repeat this slide from a previous session. Ben, will you read this for us?
Ideas very seldom come into the world consciousness and into the human mind direct from the intuitional levels. The stage of human development today does not yet permit this. They can come from the intuitional levels only when there is a very highly developed soul contact, a potent mind control, a trained intelligence, a purified emotional body, and a good glandular equipment as the result of the above requirements. Ponder on this thought. Most ideas, when of a very high order, are stepped down into the consciousness of a disciple by the disciple's master and are imparted to the disciple through mental telepathy. And as a result of the disciple's sensitivity to the psychic gift waves, as the Tibetan teaching calls them.
Many around the world at this time continue to study the sharings, the writings, the teachings that have come through different disciples. We are focusing in this series on those that came from Master Dwal Kul to Alice Bailey. Others are studying and working with the teachings of Master R through Cedar Kranz. There are others still working with the Secret Doctrine and the other writings that came through Helena Blavatsky from Master Moria. There are those studying the works of the Roriks from Master Moria. So these are the psychic gift waves that we're exposed to, and we do have a sense of waiting for the next set of gift waves that will come through. So our study of illusion should give us some idea of how we can discern the highest, the very high order of those ideas, and discern those that will be most important in moving into the coming age. Endeavoring always to develop soul contact, to have a very potent mind control, to train our intelligence, to ever purify the emotional body as we are in our work on glamour, and to maintain the physical body in such a state that we can be receptive and work in group formation as these new ideas of a very high order come into actuality. And let us not labor under the illusion that our ideas and impressions are our own. It's part of this great ocean of light. And we meet so often in group. These ideas are sensed in the interplay between disciples. When disciples meet together and thus stimulate each other's minds and centralize each other's focused attention, Master DK says they can unitedly make a contact with the world of ideas, which would otherwise be impossible, and bring through the newer concepts into being. Certain ideas are to be found existing as currents of energy upon the mental plane. These currents can there be contacted and forced into embodiment through the trained attention of disciples. These currents of mental energy, colored by a basic idea, are placed there by the hierarchy. When thus contacted and discovered, the neophyte is apt to regard his achievement in a personal way and attribute the idea to his own wisdom and power. You will note, therefore, the great need for right understanding of that which is contacted, as well as for right interpretation. This is complicated for us as we work on an international basis. For those of us who are working really across language and to begin to surface our understanding in a safe place, in a place that we can then begin to have a higher level of understanding, and that the words that are being translated from whatever language that is the original language into a common language. And that is happening more and more as we meet together, talk together, share our interpretations without any criticism, judgment, and allow the pure idea to move up in our consciousness and see the expression that is being shared in the highest light of our soul contact, adding to the group's understanding of that higher level of meaning. So let us talk and learn and better understand illusion. Heike.
Illusion to intuition. That which is the opposite pole of illusion is, as you well know, the intuition. The intuition is that recognition of reality which becomes possible as glamour and illusion disappear. An intuitive reaction to truth will take place when, along a particular line of approach to truth, the disciple has succeeded in quieting the thought form-making propensities of the mind, so that light can flow directly and without any deviation from the higher spiritual worlds. The intuition can begin to make its presence felt when glamour no longer grips the lower man, and a man's low or high desires, interpreted emotionally or self-centeredly, can no longer come between his brain consciousness and the soul. Fleeting moments of this high freedom come to all true aspirants at times, during their life struggle. They have then an intuitive flash of understanding. The outline of the future and the nature of truth sweeps momentarily through their consciousness, and life is never again exactly the same thing. They have had their guarantee that all struggle is warranted and will evoke its adequate reward.
Consider for yourself as an individual, but also in group, when you have experienced this fleeting moment, this high freedom. There is an intuitive flash of understanding. So we quiet the thought form making propensities of the mind. In Tibetan Buddhism, they call this an emptying. So for a moment, practice emptying the mind. Visualize pure white light. Practice regularly throughout the day, emptying the mind. Over time, an integration of the lower bodies occurs by the emptying of the mind and the dissipation of glamours. With the alignment of the three lower vehicles that we've had described to us in many ways by Master Dwal Kul, he says the vibrations of the abstract levels can then begin to be felt. And he goes on to say, we need to remember that they come via the causal body. The causal body, we know, on the higher subplanes of the mental plane. This, the vehicle of the higher self. And the average causal body is on the third subplane of the mental plane, where we find the quality of spiritual discernment. He says this is a point not sufficiently recognized, and it must be pondered on. Real abstract thought becomes possible only when the personality has by vibration reciprocal, vibration as the soul, the ego, and it aligns itself sufficiently to form a fairly unimpeded channel. Pause. Visualize the pure white light. Then at intervals, rare at first, but of increasing frequency, will abstract ideas begin to filter down, to be followed in due time by flashes of real illumination or intuition from the spiritual triad or the true threefold ego itself. And continue the alignment, which is the beginning, the antakarana, the channel, this shaft of opening that becomes greater and greater, using the causal body or the soul vehicle. And through the alignment, through the practice daily, moment to moment, increasingly self-forgetful, moving in utter harmlessness. The vortices open, and the flashes occur. and the ideas begin to land in the pure white light. In Letters on Occult Meditation, DK gives us this great affirmation when he tells us that each life tends to greater stability, even though seldom is the threefold personality yet to be found lined up. If so, he may put it, with the causal consciousness. But there are these temporary moments that occur when this is the case, and when in moments of highest aspiration and for purposes of unselfish endeavor, the higher and the lower form a direct line. We've read this particular excerpt from Letters on Occult Meditation in other sessions that essentially gives us the progress that we discussed when we discussed the fifth essential relation yesterday. That this line, the alignment, becomes stronger and stronger with aspiration and unselfish endeavor. And he reminded us, as we read yesterday, that aspiration is not an emotional state. It is in actuality a science. So in our work to eliminate, to dispel the illusion, to dissipate glamour, and stabilize the emotional body, it becomes, as DK states, the pure reflector. And the mental body serves the purpose of a sensitive plate and discriminator, and the intelligent explainer of the higher imparted truth. This allows for the control of the physical brain and a final alignment remains to be effected. So the brain is a direct receiver and transmitter of the imparted teaching. And the brain then reflects with accuracy the higher consciousness. So he has given us what is in effect our path. Right living, high thinking, and right application of divine ideas. For until the intuition is better developed in the average man, the very principle of manas itself forms a barrier to its due understanding. The way I would interpret that is that we see around us in our daily lives how mind is being used to develop more and more illusions, ideas that promote materialism and selfishness. And so our work is to orient and align to the higher so that we can record in our minds from the higher Buddhic level into and through the causal body and then be able to express that using the concrete mind. And achieving this mental polarization that allows us to move into the higher planes and a greater comprehension of the plan for humanity. This again is a repeat of what we have studied before. But let's read the second line. Together and as a group, we can become sensitive to the new ideas that are incoming, which are intended to condition the new age that is upon us. Together and as a group, we can establish the ideals and develop the techniques and methods of the new schools of thought, which will determine the new culture. Together and as a group, we can bring these ideas and ideals into the consciousness of the masses so that the schools of thought and world religions can be blended into one and the new civilization can emerge. So let's take a moment and just reflect on our understanding of these words. In our groups, we are all aspirants, some disciples, others initiates, all on a path, some the path of probation, some the path of discipleship, some the path of initiation. Together, we are desiring, we're working on the higher level of desire, aspiration at a higher point, and the science of aspiration to develop discrimination, to practice dispassion, to move to decision with discernment and discipline. So know thyself and bring our practices to dissipate glamour and dispel illusion into every contact. Listen without judgment, listening as the listening pilgrim, beyond the words and into motive and intention. And creating in every group this inclusive field for aspirants, disciples, and initiates, all on the path, contributing your gifts as those psychic gift waves or higher gift waves into these great currents that are on the mental plane. Expressing the will to love, synthetic, inclusive, that state of being, the grasp of the life and needs of all beings as we move together. Andrea.
Aspirants and disciples represent those brain cells which are beginning to fall into the larger divine rhythm. They are learning the nature of responsiveness. The mass of humanity are like the millions of unused brain cells which the psychologists and scientists tell us we possess but do not employ. This analogy you can think out in greater detail for yourself, but even superficially, it will be apparent to you that when this point is grasped, the purpose for which humanity exists, the objective before the group of the world mystics and workers, and the ideal set before the individual aspirant are the same as in the individual meditation. The achieving of that focused attention and mental quiet wherein reality can be contacted, the true and the beautiful can be registered, divine purpose can be recorded, and it becomes possible to transmute to the phenomenal form upon the physical plane the needed energy whereby the subjective realization can be materialized. The aspirant does this in connection with his own soul purpose if he is successful in his endeavor. The disciple is learning to do this in relation to group purpose, and the initiate cooperates with the planetary purpose.
So we do this as aspirants, as disciples, and as initiates. In group formation, we come together, and our groups are enabling the aspirants on the path of probation to come into contact with their own soul purpose. The disciples are doing this in relation to the group purpose. And the initiates among us are bringing in that which assists us in cooperating with the planetary purpose. So as we move forward in supporting groups for the dissipation of glamour and the dispelling of illusion, we have a role as aspirants, we have a role as disciples, and if we have initiate status, we have a role in terms of bringing it into the group, into the thinking, the teachings, and what we are learning selflessly into our group formations. And let's just pause to consider now the first group that Master Djwhal Khul says we have our family and immediate community. So each day, bringing the needed energy in with focused attention and mental quiet, bringing this in as part of your own soul purpose in your everyday life, family, community, work, whatever. Dissipating glamour, dispelling illusion. As disciples, think of the groups where you're bringing it in relation to the group purpose. The field of endeavor, whether that is leadership, an organizational purpose to assist humanity, healing, registering with focused attention and mental quiet to bring in divine purpose into that group or purpose. And then, as initiates, to bring planetary purpose on the highest level to our nations and world situations. And assist all in dispelling illusion and dissipating the glamours. Focusing, achieving mental quiet, making contact with the soul. Heike, would you lead us?
From the highest point of soul focus, with the attitude of the observer, we say together, I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design.
In our regular sessions to dissipate glamour, we've been reviewing the rules of thought. So keep in mind as you move forward together in the coming week. We're going to go into greater depth learning the meaning of illusion and in its midst, locate the golden thread of truth. So this lead up that we've been doing today is just to remind us that as we encounter illusion, locating the golden thread of truth that is present, substanding behind that illusion that has been placed in front of the group or humanity. And continuously discovering that thou hast a mind and learning its dual use, the use of the higher mind to infuse the concrete lower mind, reaching always upward and bringing the ideas into a form that can be shared and utilized for the sake of humanity. By concentrating the thinking principle and being the master of thy mental world. And before a thought form is by thee constructed, vision its purpose, ascertain its goal, and verify the motive. With purity of motive inspired by a loving heart, we offer ourselves in service with self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right application of divine ideas. And as DK says in Treatise on White Magic, these simple rules lay the foundation for carrying forward of any magical work and render the mental body so clear and so powerful that right motive will control and true work in building will be possible. So let's look at 3 types of knowledge. Ben, will you read beginning with the word first? There is that knowledge.
First, there is that knowledge which an ordinary man can possess, which perhaps is best expressed in the word theoretical. It makes man aware of certain hypotheses, possibilities, and explanations. It gives to him an understanding of ways, means, and methods that enables him to take the first step towards correct ascertainment and achievement. This is true of that knowledge which Patanjali deals with. By acting upon this knowledge and by conforming to the requirements of the intended investigation or development, the aspirant becomes aware of the light in the head.
Our early schooling, early educational experiences orient us to this kind of knowledge. Heike, would you read this for us, please?
Secondly, discriminative knowledge is the next type utilized by the aspirant. The light having been contacted is used, and the result in that the pairs of opposites become apparent, duality is known. And the question of choice comes in. The light of God is cast upon either side of the razor-edged path the aspirant is endeavoring to tread. And at first this noble middle path is not so apparent as that which lies on either side. By the addition of dispassion or non-attachment to discriminative knowledge, hindrances are worn away. The veil which hides the light becomes increasingly thin until eventually the third or highest light is touched.
Consider for yourself, and then consider how you might spark within a group the addition of dispassion and non-attachment to the discriminative knowledge within a group. So the veil starts to be rent, and the light is touched. Andrea.
Thirdly, the light of the intuition is one of the terms which can be applied to this type of illuminative knowledge. It results from the treading of the path and the overcoming of the pairs of opposites, and is the forerunner of complete illumination and the full light of day. True intuition on the Buddhic plane appears in flashes of insight. Most ideas, when of a very high order, are stepped down into the consciousness of a disciple by the disciple's master and are imparted to the disciple through mental telepathy, and as a result of the disciple's sensitivity to the psychic gift waves, as the Tibetan teaching calls them.
So consider for yourself where your knowledge, this achievement of knowledge, active intelligence, is currently your most utilized form of activity. Is it as the ordinary man becomes the aspirant? Theoretical, acting upon the knowledge and conforming to the requirements of the intended investigation or development, becoming aware of the light in the head? Is it the discriminative knowledge that develops on the path of discipleship, where the light is contacted, the light of the soul is contacted and used, and you're dealing primarily with the pairs of opposites, with the dualities, and you're bringing that into your daily life and all group situations, so that the light of God is casting upon either side of the path, and you can see the noble middle path emerge with dispassion, non-attachment, and discriminative knowledge as the foundation on the path of discipleship, leading to the path of initiation, the light of the intuition, overcoming the pairs of opposites, and moving into the point to become open to the full light of the day, being in touch with the Master. This is a quotation attributed to a great teacher that's included in the Tibetan's work. Intelligence is the emancipator, the forerunner of discriminative knowledge, as the dawn is of sunrise. Of the production of intuitional insight, the yogi comes to know everything. These flashes of intuition are at first simply vivid flashes of illumination, or the flashes of intuition are vivid flashes of illumination, breaking forth into the mind consciousness and disappearing almost instantly, but they come with increasing frequency as the habit of meditation is cultivated and persist for increasingly long times as stability of mind is achieved. Gradually, the light shines forth into a continuous stream until the aspirant walks in the full light of day. When the intuition begins to function, the aspirant has to learn to utilize it by turning the light, which is in him, upon all matters, obscure, subtle, and remote, and thus enlarging his horizon solving his problems, and increasing his efficiency. We are all learning to utilize the intuition by turning the light which is in us upon all matters, obscure, subtle, and remote. What we see in contact through the use of the spiritual light has then to be registered, has then to be understood, and has then to be adapted by the individual man, human being, upon the physical plane through the medium of the brain. So in the glamour technique, we are practicing this in dissipating glamour. We use the triple light, bringing in the merging of the mind and the brain, the lights of those two components, and then merging with the light of the soul. That particular practice is actually utilizing the intuition as it's beginning to function. And we're turning the light which is in us upon all matters, obscure, subtle, and remote. And this can be done in relation to any problem. Heike, would you read beginning with here?
Here is where the rational mind plays its part, interpreting, formulating, and transmitting to the brain that which the true spiritual man on his own plane knows, sees, and understands. Thus, this knowledge becomes available in full waking consciousness to the incarnated Son of God, the man on the physical plane.
This is part of the science of aspiration. And at the end of this fifth root race, fifth subrace, for humanity to have this point of achievement of knowledge as active intelligence. And have access to that which Patanjali calls the rain cloud of knowable things. And as we move into the fifth root race, sixth subrace, we're moving into the sixth root race in actuality. And that root race will appear. And the goal of the sixth root race is full use of the intuition. Thus, we are, in effect, truly forerunners. For the intuition is concerned with nothing whatsoever in the three worlds of human experience, but only with the perceptions of the spiritual triad and with the world of ideas. The intuition is to the world of meaning what the mind is to the three worlds of experience. It produces understanding, just as the light of the soul produces knowledge through the medium of that experience. So this goal for the 6th root race is to be concerned with nothing whatsoever in the 3 worlds of human experience, but only with the perceptions of the spiritual triad and with the world of ideas. Something that's almost incomprehensible. But let us realize that we are, as aspirants, disciples, and initiates, on this path. And we are, in effect, awakening the head center in a way that this center will allow the soul to make full contact with the personality through our meditation, service, and the science of aspiration. The full awakening of the soul vehicle, the causal body. From the idealism, that high idealism of the Buddhic plane, the intuition of the Buddhic plane, the divine vision of the Buddhic plane, the healing of the Buddhic plane, we can receive impressions that move through the causal body in that channel, the Antakarana, creating in our minds ideas that are recorded, from which we can create thought forms of solution. The 5th mental plane, the 7th, the lowest of those planes, the thought forms of solution. We'll go through these 3 stages before we close for today. They are pre-recorded, so let's listen. Whoops. I guess we will read them. The stage of mental recording. The clarity and the accuracy of this recording is dependent upon the condition of the channel of reception, the Antakarana. In this recording, curiously enough, a certain element of time enters in. It's not time as we know it upon the physical plane, which is but the registration of the brain of passing events. It is the higher mental correspondence to time. Into this, he says, I cannot here enter, as the theme is too abstruse, for time in this connection is related to distance, to descent, to focus, and to the power to record. The value of meditation, contemplation, concentration, focusing after alignment. Second, the stage of brain reception. The accuracy of this reception is dependent upon the quality of the physical brain cells, upon the polarization of the thinking man in the head center, and the freedom of the brain cells from all emotional impression. Having achieved that state of complete dispassion, the difficulty lies here. that the receiving aspirant or the focused thinker is always aware emotionally of the descent of the higher impression and of the consequent clarification of the theme of his thought. This must, however, be recorded by a perfectly quiescent astral vehicle, and therefore you will see one of the main objectives of true meditation, and also the objective of our use of the technique of light to dispel glamour and illusion. Interestingly, it is also to have control of that highest astral subplane where emotional idealism rests. So this idea of complete and utter freedom from all emotional impression. And third, the stage of recognized interpretation. And this, he says, is an exceedingly difficult phase, and interpretation is dependent upon many factors: educational background, the point reached in evolution, mystical or occult approach of the disciple to the center of truth, freedom from the lower psychism, essential humility, which plays a major part in proper understanding, and personality decentralization. In fact, the character in its entirety is involved in this important matter of correct interpretation. So this is probably these three, but this particularly important in terms of our ability to work in group to recognize illusory components that are touching the idea that is being shared, and emotional components that we need to recognize without judgment, without criticism, so that in the group formation of an idea, there can be a purity in which the recognized interpretation can put the correct impress on the idea, the thought form. And he does remind us that few idealists are personally in touch with the idea, which has given birth to the idealism that we're bringing in from the Buddhic plane. We're only in touch with the human interpretation of the idea as formulated by some disciple or intuitive, a very different thing. One that we are confronted with in these days is this idea of freedom and the illusion of freedom. Two completely different things. And then bringing in ideas in which the thought form is reflecting the divine ideal of freedom onto that concrete mental plane of manifestation of that idea as a thought form to serve humanity. So we have now our definition of illusion. We've gone a little bit over the hour, but let's close today reading this and carry it with us, as well as pondering these great ideas from Master Dwal Kul as we move forward into our study of the dispelling of illusion. Andrea, would you read this for us, please?
Illusion, for our purposes, can be understood to signify the reaction of the undisciplined mind to the newly contacted world of ideas. This contact opens up from the moment a man has aligned himself and brought the lower nature into touch with the higher. Ideas come to us from the plane of the intuition. the soul illumines the plane of the mind and the plane of the intuition, so that they stand revealed to each other, and their mutual relationship becomes then apparent. The mind of the man, which is slowly becoming the center of his consciousness and the major reality in his existence, becomes aware of this new and undiscovered world of ideas, and he seizes upon some idea or group of ideas and endeavors to make them his own. At first, with the majority of people, and especially with the average mystical type, the appreciation of ideas is vague and nebulous, and frequently is arrived at from a second-hand angle. The illumination, coming through the medium of the feebly established soul contact, seems to the unaccustomed neophyte to be of a supreme wonder and a vital moment. The ideas contacted appear to him of great marvel and superbly unusual and vitally needed by humanity.
So in the coming week, ponder on this in relation to your groups. The first group, our closest family and immediate community, where we are every day in our existence. The larger group, the nation that we're part of, or the great community of workers that we are part of, either as spiritual workers or healers or psychologists or teachers, that other greater group. And then our serving groups, those that are working towards a focused spiritual end, where we find our place in healing. In serving as the new group of world servers. Consider your relationship and the ideas that you are encountering and the illusions in which you may feel some dissonance and the need to reestablish the soul illumination from the plane of mind and the plane of intuition to inform your own actions, your own thoughts, and the ideas that you're sharing and bringing forward as the right application of divine ideas, selflessly and harmlessly. So we'll look further into it in terms of the ray types. We'll begin to look at how distortions of ideas develop. We'll look at the inclination of certain types and what aspirants must learn to distinguish between. And we'll always sound the warning that development proceeds not in ordered sections, that it proceeds as part of this great system, so that our continuously reminding ourselves we are where we are in perfect alignment with our soul, and to just keep that in mind as we, in our small spheres, continue to be of service of the world. And in this group, we are thinking the teaching into the minds of the public, expressing before our fellow human beings the teaching it imparts as best we can, and that may be telepathically, and by a life lived in conforming with its teaching. And your service is real. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech.